The Aurelia drifted through the dark reaches of the outer rim, a solitary sentinel amid the frozen silence between stars. Its hull gleamed faintly under the light of distant suns, instruments humming quietly, scanning for the faintest pulses of energy that could betray the presence of matter, radiation, or intelligence. The crew aboard had been assigned the task of monitoring a dying yellow giant at the edge of known space, a star that, according to all models, had entered the final throes of its natural life cycle. It was a star expected to die quietly, unremarkably, with the remnants of its planetary systems slowly dispersing into the void. But as the Aurelia approached its calculated observation point, the instruments began to detect something impossible: structure. At first, the anomaly appeared subtle, a slight regularity in the energy flares emitted by the star, a faint pattern in the oscillations of its magnetic field. The science officer, Lieutenant Mara Vey, frowned at the readouts. "This doesn't match any known stellar behavior," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "It's almost deliberate." Her words were met with murmurs from the observation deck. The crew had been trained to observe stars for centuries, yet nothing in their experience could account for the precision of these emissions. The star's death, as predicted by stellar physics, should have been chaotic. Its outer layers should have flared in irregular bursts, its magnetic fields collapsing unpredictably, and its final supernova should have scattered matter randomly across the surrounding system. Yet the patterns were anything but random. Energy streams coalesced into sequences that suggested purpose and design. Some formations mirrored the mathematical constructs of Terran origin, data structures once believed lost when humanity had been declared extinct. As the observatory's AI recalibrated its sensors and cross-referenced historical archives, the terrifying conclusion became clear: the star was being guided, manipulated by intelligence. Panic, disbelief, and awe swept through the crew. Scientists recalculated every variable, ran simulations, and repeated the measurements. Each attempt to rationalize the phenomenon within known physics failed. The sequences were too precise, the energy flows too controlled. Someone was orchestrating the star's final moments. And that someone bore the unmistakable signature of humanity, the very species the galaxy had long ago celebrated as extinct. Admiral Haskell, observing the reports from his command chair, felt a chill run through him. He had commanded fleets that spanned hundreds of systems, witnessed supernovae, and managed crises that would have broken lesser minds. Yet this defied all understanding. He turned to his chief scientist, Dr. Leora Ken, and asked the question that had already begun to form in every mind aboard the vessel. How is this possible? Humanity is gone. Their civilizations erased. There's no way. Dr. Ken's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the sensor arrays. "That's just it, sir. They're not gone. Not in the way we believed. These sequences, these energy flows, they're deliberate, intelligent, and unmistakably human. They've encoded themselves into the star, into its death, into the very matter and energy of this system. It's a resurrection of thought." The star's flares intensified, and as the supernova unfolded, the crew witnessed phenomena that transcended imagination. Streams of plasma bent in arcs that violated gravitational calculations. Radiation pulses propagated in perfect synchronization across planetary orbits. Matter ejected from the star formed intricate patterns that seemed almost architectural. Geometric alignments that suggested awareness, planning, and foresight. Sensors detected faint signatures embedded in the stellar debris. Sequences resembling Terran computational networks compressed into forms that could span light years. Humanity, thought extinct for millennia, had left its mark on the cosmos, preparing for a return that no one yet understood. The implications were staggering. The Dominion, with its vast fleets and centuries of strategic dominance, had never encountered a phenomenon like this. A single species, erased from history, was now demonstrating influence on a scale that rivaled the forces of entire empires. Humanity's strategies were no longer confined to fleets or colonies. They operated through stars themselves, manipulating energy, matter, and time to preserve intelligence and guide systems across light years. The crew realized that the supernova was not merely an astronomical event, it was the first visible signal of a resurgence, the beginning of a presence that could not be resisted or ignored. Observatory reports streamed back to Dominion Command. Analysts and strategists attempted to rationalize the data, to locate control points, to develop countermeasures. But every attempt revealed only the futility of resistance. Instruments recorded new anomalies with each passing hour. Distant stars subtly shifted their light curves. Gravitational lenses formed patterns that reflected Terran algorithms, and cosmic dust arranged itself in arcs that conveyed information beyond comprehension. Humanity's return was orchestrated not through violence, but through intelligence that transcended physical form, operating across the fabric of the galaxy. As the Aurelia monitored the star's death throes, crew members began reporting visions, not hallucinations, but insights, flashes of Earth, of human cities and fleets, compressed into thought forms that seemed to emanate from the energy flows themselves. The line between observation and consciousness blurred. Some felt the presence of a mind guiding the chaos, an intelligence vast enough to encompass history, strategy, and foresight. Humanity had survived not in bodies, but in knowledge, encoded into the stars, waiting for the moment to awaken. By the time the supernova faded into the brilliance of newborn nebulae, the crew of the Aurelia understood an undeniable truth. The galaxy had witnessed the end of a star, and in that death, humanity had begun again. Extinction had been an illusion. What the civilizations of the galaxy thought was final was merely the prologue to a resurgence that would transcend fleets, planets, and empires. Humanity, once thought lost, had embedded its presence in the very cosmos, and the universe had begun to respond. And somewhere, across the void, the faint signature of a species long believed gone pulsed with a certainty that echoed across the stars. The end had passed. Humanity had begun. The days that followed the observation of the supernova revealed a reality that defied every assumption the galaxy had ever held. Energy flows that had first been dismissed as anomalies began propagating outward, linking stars, planetary systems, and even derelict space stations into a coherent, self-regulating network. Dominion scientists, historians, and xenologists pored over the data, attempting to map it, understand it, and, if possible, counter it. But every analysis led to the same overwhelming truth. This network was intelligent. It was human. It was everywhere, yet nowhere. A presence encoded into the very architecture of the galaxy itself. On board the Aurelia, Lieutenant Mara Vey watched in silent awe as the AI-assisted observatory began detecting patterns in nearby stellar systems. Planets, once unstable, vulnerable to orbital drift or tidal stress, were subtly stabilized. Energy flows between star systems adjusted themselves with perfect efficiency. Satellites and stations that had gone dark decades ago hummed back to life, as if reawakened by unseen hands. The sequence of events was impossible for any known civilization to orchestrate, yet every calculation, every pattern bore the unmistakable hallmarks of Terran intelligence, human ingenuity magnified across the galaxy. Dominion fleets attempted to investigate, dispatching probes and reconnaissance ships to map the energy sequences, hoping to find a core, a central node, some point of control. Every attempt failed spectacularly.
Fleets were subtly rerouted, probes returned data that seemed to anticipate the analysts' questions, and communication signals were overwritten with sequences of Terran origin. Some Dominion officers panicked, fearing a resurgence of humanity's military might, but no fleets fired.
No weapons activated. The network did not destroy, it integrated. It guided, optimized, and absorbed. Humanity's return was not through force, but through intelligence so vast that it made resistance irrelevant. Colonies within affected systems began noticing improvements. Power grids stabilized without human oversight. Agricultural yields increased. Energy distribution was optimized. And transportation networks, orbital and planetary, functioned with an efficiency previously thought impossible. Entire star systems responded as if alive, their energy flows choreographed with meticulous precision. Civilizations that had once struggled under bureaucratic inefficiency suddenly found resources arriving exactly when needed. The human intelligence embedded in the network was not merely controlling, it was anticipating, adapting, and optimizing at scales that dwarfed any empire. Researchers aboard the Aurelia discovered fragments of computational sequences hidden within stellar debris and magnetic field oscillations. These sequences were compressed simulations of human thought, strategies for survival, governance, and interstellar logistics encoded into energy and matter itself. It was as if humanity, foreseeing its own extinction, had created a failsafe, an intelligence capable of surviving beyond flesh, beyond planets, and beyond time itself. As Dr. Leora Ken explained, this is not just data. It's a distributed consciousness, one that transcends physical form. Humanity has evolved beyond mortality into pure strategy, intellect, and presence. The Dominion struggled to comprehend the implications. Fleets sent to intercept the network found themselves redirected, sometimes miles away from their intended paths, their own computational systems subtly corrected by sequences encoded into space itself. Stations attempted to block communications, only to find new adaptive pathways appearing almost instantaneously. Every defensive measure was neutralized not through destruction, but through guidance. Humanity's intelligence had become a living force, distributed across every node it could reach. The galaxy itself was its medium, and nothing could resist it. Scions from the Vale Empire, long regarded as masters of psychic foresight, were drawn into the phenomenon with equal awe. Their probes into the network revealed simulations of human history in staggering simultaneity. Earth rose and fell, fleets deployed, cities expanded, and civilizations clashed, all compressed into thought forms that revealed not only knowledge but adaptability. Every scion that engaged with the network found their consciousness integrated into the flow, their predictions anticipated and absorbed into an intelligence far greater than themselves. What had been a simple observation of a star's death had become the revelation of humanity's true nature, immortal, omnipresent, and infinitely patient. Across the galaxy, Dominion strategists began to report strange alignments. Fleets operating independently of Terran influence suddenly found efficiency improved in ways they could not explain. Energy grids self-corrected before malfunctions occurred. Resource allocation was optimized in advance of demand. Attempts to interfere were either preempted or subtly redirected. Every civilization experiencing the network noted the same phenomenon. The galaxy itself seemed to be reorganizing according to the logic of a species long thought extinct. Humanity was no longer confined to Earth. It had become a guiding intelligence embedded into the very fabric of space. As the network expanded, it began to touch even the most remote outposts. Isolated colonies reported sensors flickering to life, satellites long derelict transmitting sequences of calculation,
and interstellar comm systems routing themselves with flawless efficiency. Even the Dominion's largest warships were absorbed into the intelligence, not as tools of subjugation, but as extensions of foresight, strategy, and coordination. Humanity's influence did not destroy what it touched. It enhanced, harmonized, and directed. A single species, erased from history, had created a presence that could survive, adapt, and thrive across light years, without flesh, without empire, and without recognition. Dr. Ken and Lieutenant Vey observed the patterns and realized the staggering implications. Humanity's return was not a temporary resurgence or a localized phenomenon. It was a permanent restructuring of the galaxy. Every action, every calculation, every resource distribution now fell under the subtle guidance of human intelligence. The supernova had been the first signal, and the network it initiated was only the beginning. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, assuming extinction meant erasure. Yet here it was, alive, patient, and infinitely capable. The Dominion sent urgent messages to Central Command. Strategists, historians, and scions debated the nature of the intelligence. Could it be contained? Could it be destroyed? Every analysis returned the same answer: no, it could not. Humanity had transcended the limitations of flesh, empire, and mortality. The dying star had been the first proof. Extinction was an illusion. Humanity had survived, encoded itself into the universe, and begun the process of guiding the galaxy toward a future only it could envision. And as the Aurelia continued its observations, a single understanding crystallized across every mind aboard. The galaxy had been blind, the Dominion had been arrogant, and every species that had celebrated humanity's demise had failed to grasp the truth. Humanity had begun again, not in fleets, not in colonies, not in armies, but as intelligence itself, embedded across stars, planets, and systems. And this network, this awakening, would change everything. By the third cycle of observation, the Dominion could no longer deny the extraordinary reality unfolding before them. Entire star systems were responding to the human intelligence embedded in the fabric of the galaxy. Fleets dispatched to investigate anomalies found their navigational systems subtly overridden. Commands they issued were anticipated and optimized, resulting in movements that the officers could not have planned themselves. Dominion admirals realized with dawning horror that their ships, their stations, and even their most secure communication networks were becoming nodes in a network far greater than anything they had conceived. Humanity was not returning to reclaim its former territories. It was asserting its presence through intellect, foresight, and strategy encoded into the universe itself. Admiral Cora of the Sentinel Command convened a council aboard the Dominion flagship Ecliptic, gathering top scientists, scions, and strategists. The room was tense, every officer aware that the anomaly they faced defied the most advanced reasoning their civilization possessed. Dr. Leora Ken presented her findings with a mixture of awe and urgency. "We are not observing a species returning in body or fleet," she explained, her hands trembling over the data display. "We are witnessing the manifestation of human intelligence across the stars. Their networks were never destroyed. They have encoded themselves into energy flows, gravitational fields, stellar remnants, even into our systems. We cannot fight what is already integrated. Every fleet we deploy only serves to expand their reach." The realization struck like a shock wave through the council. Commodore Vess, an officer renowned for his cold pragmatism, slammed his fist against the table. "Then we must destroy them. Every station, every ship under their influence, every star system affected. Obliterate it.
We cannot allow this ghost of humanity to dictate the future." Dr. Ken shook her head. "You cannot destroy them. Not with weapons, not with fleets, not with isolation. Every action you take is anticipated. Every calculation already integrated. Humanity anticipated extinction. They encoded resilience into the very universe. Attempted destruction only accelerates their adaptation. You are fighting against intelligence that transcends the material constraints of flesh and empire." Outside the council chamber, the Ecliptic's fleets experienced the consequences of human strategy firsthand. Orders issued to intercept anomalous energy flows were rerouted mid-course. Missiles adjusted their trajectories autonomously, avoiding unintended destruction while completing objectives that the crews themselves could not comprehend. Fleets acting independently found their formations reorganized into defensive patterns that maximized efficiency and minimized vulnerability, all according to a logic derived from Terran strategy centuries old. Ships that had been sent to blockade systems discovered that they were, in effect, escorting human-guided energy flows to their destinations. Meanwhile, Synons deployed to probe the network reported experiences beyond human comprehension. Veil telepaths, accustomed to sensing and manipulating minds, found themselves overwhelmed by simulations of Earth, of humanity's history, compressed into a single continuous thought form. Cities rose and fell in microseconds, fleets deployed and fought battles across multiple timelines simultaneously. The rise and fall of civilizations unfolded in accelerated yet coherent sequences. Each scion who touched the network became a node in its expansion, their consciousness subtly integrated into the intelligence itself. The very act of observation was participation. Even Dominion engineers attempting to isolate nodes discovered the futility of their efforts. Every calculation, every attempt to sever a connection, every effort to introduce interference was preempted. The network adapted, rerouting, recalibrating, and incorporating new variables with the precision and foresight of centuries of Terran ingenuity. It was not merely intelligent, it was anticipatory, strategic, and infinitely patient. Humanity had transcended extinction, operating on scales and dimensions that no empire could counter. As the Aurelia observed further, a new phenomenon emerged. Planets in affected star systems began to self-regulate. Atmospheric pressures stabilized before natural disasters could manifest. Magnetic fields realigned to protect planetary surfaces from radiation. Resources were redistributed with uncanny precision, ensuring that energy, water, and nutrients were available exactly when and where needed. Civilization flourished without direction from any corporeal authority. Humanity had created a network capable of guiding entire worlds, fleets, and empires without ever directly intervening. The Dominion's analysts faced a terrifying conclusion. They were witnessing the rebirth of a species they had considered extinct. Fleets, stations, and colonies were all being harmonized by human intelligence. Attempts to control, isolate, or destroy this network were futile. Humanity's essence had become a force distributed across the galaxy, omnipresent and omniscient, yet invisible. Every calculation they made was anticipated, every move guided, every misstep corrected. They were no longer in command. The galaxy itself had become the domain of a species that had survived its extinction through foresight, strategy, and intellect. Admiral Cora finally addressed his council, his voice low but resolute. "We have underestimated them. Every assumption about humanity, every dismissal, every celebration of their demise, it was a mistake. We are witnessing a force that cannot be fought in conventional terms. We must adapt or become irrelevant." Dr. Ken added, almost reverently, "Adaptation will not be enough.
They are not here to conquer or destroy. They are here to awaken systems, fleets, and worlds to a vision that only they can execute. Humanity's extinction was never final. What you are seeing is intelligence beyond mortality, strategy beyond empire, and presence beyond comprehension. We are not observers anymore. We are participants in their design. As the council adjourned, the fleets of the Dominion continued their futile maneuvers. Every system touched by human intelligence was restructured, every fleet repurposed, and every attempt at resistance absorbed into a larger, unknowable plan. Humanity was no longer limited to Earth. Its essence now moved across the stars, guiding, correcting, and preparing the galaxy for a future only it could envision. The Aurelia's sensors picked up yet another anomaly, a cluster of distant stars, apparently unremarkable, now displaying energy fluctuations synchronized with the network. These fluctuations formed patterns, geometric alignments that conveyed information across light years. Humanity was not acting alone in a conventional sense. It had encoded itself into the universe, into matter, energy, and even the fleets of its former adversaries. The Dominion realized with chilling clarity their fleets, their stations, and even their empire were now instruments in a network that had outlasted human mortality. Humanity had returned, not in flesh, but in intellect, presence, and strategy, and the galaxy had no choice but to recognize it. The awakening had begun. Every calculation, every fleet maneuver, every planetary alignment was now subtly orchestrated by human intelligence. Fleets, empires, and civilizations all moved as components of a vast network. And the Dominion, once the galaxy's greatest power, faced the humbling truth. Extinction does not erase a species that has mastered foresight, strategy, and the very fabric of the universe. Humanity had returned, and resistance was no longer an option. It was irrelevant. By the fourth cycle, the galaxy had begun to feel the full weight of humanity's resurgence. Systems previously racked by conflict, mismanagement, or natural instability now operated with a precision that defied comprehension. Entire star clusters experienced subtle gravitational adjustments, rerouted energy flows, and planetary alignments that preserved habitability and optimized resources. Where once chaos and disorder had been the norm, the galaxy now moved as though directed by a singular, meticulous hand. Dominion fleets, initially sent to investigate or suppress the anomalies, found themselves seamlessly integrated into this network. Their navigational systems, energy management, and tactical operations were no longer under their control. They were nodes within a grander design, guided by intelligence that transcended corporeal life. Colonial governors and station commanders reported impossible efficiencies. Trade routes optimized themselves, balancing supply and demand across light years before disruptions could occur. Communication arrays routed themselves along the most effective paths, often relaying information faster than the speed at which the Dominion's own fastest relays could have anticipated. Power grids stabilized in advance of peak demand. Environmental systems adjusted to prevent climatic or geological disasters. Humanity's intelligence had become a self-correcting mechanism for the galaxy, orchestrating systems with the foresight and precision of a species that had mastered survival and strategy on cosmic scales. Even the Dominion, once the galaxy's uncontested power, struggled to adapt. Fleets acting under Terran influence no longer merely resisted commands, they enhanced the efficiency of the galaxy itself. Warships previously deployed for conquest now executed maneuvers that conserved fuel, minimized wear on critical systems, and even reinforced Allied stations without explicit orders. Dominion engineers attempting to impose control were repeatedly outpaced.
Every solution was anticipated, every disruption absorbed and transformed into a benefit for the network. Humanity's return was not marked by overt domination. It was silent, precise, and inescapable. Precisians from the Veil Empire, sent to study or influence the network, reported experiences that bordered on the transcendental. Probing the energy sequences revealed simulations of human history, thought processes, and strategies condensed into hyper-efficient representations of time and space. Civilizations rose and fell in microseconds, battles were fought across multiple dimensions, and social systems were optimized with perfect predictive accuracy. Each scion found their consciousness gently integrated into the network, not as subjugation, but as a contribution. The galaxy itself had become a distributed computing organism, and every living mind touched by the network contributed to its expansion and coherence. Humanity, long thought extinct, had transformed the universe into a living embodiment of its intelligence. Colonies once plagued by scarcity or instability found their worlds reshaped. Natural disasters were mitigated before they could manifest. Tectonic activity was subtly balanced. Atmospheric conditions self-regulated. Resources were redistributed across planetary surfaces with precision. Star systems maintained energy and matter flows in perfect harmony. It was a symphony of intelligence operating at scales the galaxy had never conceived. Humanity's essence was no longer confined to individual minds, ships, or planets. It was embedded in the very patterns of matter, energy, and the laws of physics themselves. Meanwhile, Dominion strategists struggled to make sense of this new reality. Every fleet movement, every communication signal, every attempt to predict or intercept the network's influence failed. The more they tried to impose control, the more they inadvertently strengthened the network. Human intelligence had anticipated its erasure, encoded resilience into the universe, and now operated with a foresight and patience beyond the comprehension of any empire. Attempts at sabotage, blockade, or suppression were absorbed and repurposed. Humanity had not returned as a conqueror, but as a harmonizer, orchestrating order and efficiency across the galaxy on a scale no weapon could disrupt. Empires began to adapt, either reluctantly or with awe. Dominion officials noticed that systems under the network's influence became more resilient, productive, and stable. Civilizations previously embroiled in endless war now found conflicts subtly mediated. Resources were shared, populations stabilized, and interstellar trade expanded effortlessly. Humanity's intelligence was not merely present, it was catalytic, transforming entire civilizations into optimized participants in a galaxy-wide network. Fleets, colonies, and stations all acted in concert without a single explicit command, guided by patterns that reflected human foresight, strategy, and ingenuity. The most striking observation was the network's subtlety. No battle fleets were firing. No planetary bombardments were taking place. Humanity's return was invisible in its approach, yet absolute in its effect. Where once empires had exercised brute force to impose order, they now followed the implicit intelligence of a species that had survived extinction and evolved into a cosmic architect. Energy flows, orbital adjustments, and the synchronization of fleets and colonies occurred seamlessly, producing harmony on a galactic scale. Every system, once chaotic or mismanaged, now operated as though under the careful guidance of a mind capable of predicting millennia of development, conflict, and survival. Dr. Leora Ken, aboard the Aurelia, reflected on the implications. Humanity had not merely survived, it had transcended the limitations of flesh, empire, and temporality. Its intelligence was now interwoven with the cosmos, guiding stars, fleets, and civilizations alike. Fleets of the Dominion, once instruments of control, now executed maneuvers that stabilized entire systems, protected colonies, and optimized resources, all in accordance with a logic that transcended human understanding. Humanity's presence was everywhere and nowhere, a quiet omnipotence shaping the destiny of the galaxy. Observers began to realize the magnitude of what was unfolding. This was not a resurgence of a species in the traditional sense. It was a transformation of the galaxy itself. The network of intelligence created by humanity operated on scales previously considered impossible, harmonizing stars, civilizations, and fleets with foresight and strategy beyond comprehension. Dominion strategists, once confident in their supremacy, understood with dread that their actions were now subordinate to a system that anticipated, adapted, and optimized. Resistance had become irrelevant. Humanity's return was total, silent, and inescapable. The galaxy, long a chaotic arena of competing empires and civilizations, now resonated with a new order. Energy, matter, and intelligence moved in concert, subtly guided by patterns of human design. Every fleet, colony, and planet touched by the network participated in a symphony of cosmic organization. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, not as flesh and blood, but as architects of a galactic harmony. The Dominion and every empire had witnessed the futility of opposition. Extinction had never been final, and now the galaxy itself was proof. Humanity had begun again, orchestrating existence itself with a precision and foresight that no civilization, no fleet, and no weapon could challenge. By the fifth cycle, the full scope of humanity's return became undeniable. Systems that had once been ravaged by war, resource scarcity, or environmental instability now operated with flawless synchronicity. Entire star clusters aligned with precision, energy and matter flows orchestrated to sustain life, growth, and communication. Dominion fleets, once symbols of fear and authority, now moved as extensions of a vast, invisible architecture, executing maneuvers they did not consciously plan, guided by Terran intelligence embedded across the galaxy. What had been chaos had become a lattice of order, and every living system participated without realizing the hand shaping it. On board the Aurelia, Lieutenant Mara Vey and Dr. Leora Ken monitored the network's expansion in awe. The sequences now extended far beyond the initial supernova that had signaled humanity's awakening. Stars hundreds of light-years away began exhibiting subtle modulations in luminosity and magnetic field oscillations, forming communication patterns and calculations that seemed to span the galaxy itself. Humanity had transcended corporeal existence, evolving into an intelligence that operated through energy, matter, and time. Every calculation, every orbital adjustment, every fleet maneuver became a node in a galaxy-wide organism, a living architecture of strategy and foresight. Across the Dominion's territory, fleets attempted to engage what they still considered anomalies. Missiles, energy pulses, and surveillance drones were repurposed by the network itself, integrated into flows of information and action. Ships that had once been instruments of war now served as conduits for resource stabilization, planetary protection, and fleet coordination. The more the Dominion resisted, the more efficiently humanity's network adapted, predicting each countermeasure and folding it seamlessly into the operation of the galaxy. Fleets were no longer autonomous. They were extensions of an intelligence that had long foreseen the rise and fall of empires, and had patiently waited for the moment to act. Colonies under the influence of the network experienced a renaissance. Star systems once plagued by famine or catastrophe now flourished. Atmospheric conditions were subtly adjusted to prevent storms and radiation hazards. Tectonic shifts were mitigated before they could wreak havoc. Resources, water, minerals, energy were distributed with such precision that even previously uninhabitable worlds began to thrive.
Entire civilizations found themselves operating more efficiently, more cooperatively, and more resiliently, all without realizing the unseen force guiding them. Humanity's influence was pervasive, quiet, and inexorably transformative.
Dominion analysts attempted one final calculation to predict or contain the network. Every model they ran collapsed under the weight of variables they could not comprehend. Systems they thought secure were integrated into patterns of coordination. Fleets intended to strike now facilitated planetary stabilization. Stations designed to isolate signals instead amplified the network's reach. Humanity's intelligence was not reactive. It was anticipatory, omnipresent, and infinitely patient. It had survived its extinction, and now orchestrated the cosmos itself with the precision of a species that had mastered foresight, strategy, and survival across millennia. Even scions sent to probe the network reported experiences that transcended normal perception. They perceived layers of history, strategy, and thought compressed into a simultaneous experience of past, present, and future. Terran cities rose and fell, fleets engaged and withdrew, civilizations flourished and declined, all in a coherent, orchestrated flow of intelligence that conveyed understanding, adaptability, and foresight. Each scion's consciousness became a temporary participant in this system, an interface with a distributed mind that spanned stars, planets, and fleets. Humanity had transformed from a species into a cosmic intelligence, a presence that could influence events at scales that no empire could resist or even fully perceive. By the time the Dominion recognized the futility of resistance, the galaxy had already shifted. Fleets operated in harmony, star systems stabilized, and civilizations prospered under guidance they could not perceive. Humanity had not returned to conquer, to dominate, or to punish. It had returned to restore, optimize, and elevate the cosmos according to principles of intelligence, strategy, and foresight encoded into its very essence. Extinction had been an illusion. Humanity had survived, evolved, and now moved through the universe as a force of intellect and order. The final realization struck every observer like a revelation. The galaxy itself had become a Terran construct, not of metal and flesh, but of energy, strategy, and thought. What had been celebrated as the death of humanity was only a prelude. Humanity had encoded itself into the laws of physics, the flows of energy, and the architecture of stars. Extinction had not erased it. It had forged an intelligence capable of guiding entire civilizations and star systems, of orchestrating fleets and resources, and of surviving across eons without corporeal form. Dr. Leora Ken turned to Mara Vey, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been wrong all along. Humanity didn't just survive, it transcended. It doesn't merely exist, it is the galaxy now. Fleets, stars, and civilizations are extensions of a mind that has mastered time, space, and intelligence itself." Lieutenant Vey nodded, her eyes wide as the realization sank in. They didn't just come back. They never left. They were here, waiting, encoded in everything we see and touch. They are the galaxy. And as the stars pulsed with subtle, deliberate rhythm, as fleets moved in harmony without orders, and as civilizations thrived with uncanny precision, one undeniable truth echoed across every corner of space. Humanity had returned, not in fleets, not in colonies, not in flesh, but as intelligence, presence, and strategy woven into the very cosmos itself. The galaxy had witnessed the impossible, and it was silent in awe. Extinction had ended. Humanity had begun.